Hannah Soubry, welcome to Acting Prime Minister. Thanks for having us in your office here.
Thank you.
The first thing I noticed when I walked in was the Telegraph front page you got up there. The Brexit mutineers.
Yeah.
It's like you're trolling yourself by putting that on the wall.
Well, the joke is that was my birthday present, my 60th, I think, birthday present from my team and all the MPs who were called out and horribly abused by the Daily Telegraph and indeed other newspapers all signed it. So it's a great memento, actually. I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, it's as if you wear it as a badge of honour almost.
Absolutely. The trouble is some of them didn't actually weren't mutineers in the end, but still a great team.
I mean, I know you've been asked about this many times, but you do get a lot of flack. I'm surprised you want to remind yourself of it sometimes.
Well, I don't really, but it's more a tribute to the others and their great courage. But yeah, I do get quite a bit of flack.
Okay. Well, look, you're going to get even more flack as Prime Minister, and we're promoting you for the next half an hour.
Of course, I'd forgotten. Thank you for that.
Exactly, and you go to Downing Street. You've got some immediate decisions to make now as Prime Minister. Most importantly of all, you get into that study of Downing Street, you've got to pour yourself a drink. What drink's it going to be?
At the moment, on a day like today, undoubtedly it would be water. Definitely.
And if you needed something a bit stiffer?
Probably a glass of white wine.
Okay, yeah.
Nice and cold.
Nice.
Pinot, Grigio, white wine. That would be nice.
Who's the first person you'd call, do you think, as Prime Minister?
Well, I would have made some personal calls,
Yeah.
obviously, but work call? Well, you've got to appoint your cabinet. So you'd make those calls first.
We'll get onto that later, yeah.
Quite. So the first big call, I'd ring Macron.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say to President Macron, hello, new Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
And because somehow, by some miracle, I have become the Prime Minister of this great country, clearly on my beliefs and my manifesto commitments, by some miracle, we're having a people's vote. So, President Macron, please bear with me whilst we get that all up and running. And in that event, we will need an extension, please, from October the 31st.
Mm-hmm.
And we would like you very much to back that. And then we will have our people's vote. And whilst you're on, I do need to have a chat with you about how we put into action the sort of way of doing politics, which I know has inspired so many people, and which I believe is the way forward, which is why, of course, people like Chuka Umunna went to see Macron and find out how it had been done with a view to us doing the same, but unfortunately has gone a different course.
Mm-hmm. We'll get onto that too later. Who's the first person you'd sack?
Well, everybody's gone.
True.
Sorry.
Who would you really enjoy sacking, though, in that
Oh,
current
no,
cabinet?
I wouldn't do that. No, not doing that. No, I think that's horrible. You don't demean and treat people like that.
No.
You do not behave like that. It's a horrible thing to do. It's to call in somebody and deliberately humiliate them, send them out the back door. No, absolutely not. It's a revolting way to carry on. You don't behave like that.
Because actually, when you were a cabinet minister, Theresa May decided not to keep you on. So I suppose you have some personal experience of how it feels to be kind of treated like that.
Well, I was treated like nothing. I didn't get anything. I just worked it out that I didn't have a job.
Just the phone didn't ring and you thought, right, I'm not in.
Absolutely. Phone didn't ring. I knew I wasn't in. So I thought, well, I'm not in, so I might as well resign. So I resigned. And then I announced I was resigning, and then the chief whip went bananas and said, no, you mustn't resign. She's going to offer you a fantastic job. I said, I think they'll find they've gone. And then I did get a phone call from the Prime Minister, and she offered me a job in the Ministry of Justice, and I said, thank you very much, but no. I'm very happy to go back to the backbenchers, thank you.
Yeah, because by then you'd had some pretty high-profile jobs, so I'm guessing.
Yeah, I suppose so. I
You'd
mean,
been Defence Minister.
I'd been Defence
Business
Minister, Health Minister, and I'd been number 2 in Biz. So I'd taken the very firm view that at the next reshuffle, if I didn't get a promotion, I was going on the backbenchers, not through some sort of act of all the rest of it, not at all. It was simply that if I got as far as I was going to go, I really wanted to go back to the backbenchers. Because I hadn't been a backbencher for very long before I became a member of government.
True. Yeah.
It was only a few months. I was made a PPS not long after getting elected in May of 2010.
Yeah.
I was a PPS by September. So I really wanted to go back onto the backbenchers. And of course the truth is, I couldn't have been in a government that was going to try and deliver Brexit in such a terrible way in any event.
And so you did become a backbencher, and a very vocal backbencher, campaigning for a second referendum. Of course, you left the Conservative Party, as if we could forget, to form your own party. So look, you go in to Downing Street, you've got to make your first speech as Prime Minister, and you are, I assume, Prime Minister for the party of the independent group for Change. So what would be, in that speech, what would be your defining mission, do you think? How would you sum it up?
A people's vote, and whatever the outcome of that vote, but would be absolutely determinedly and properly campaigning for us to remain in the European Union. But the alternative being the only alternative, which is still Mrs May's deal, but with the absolute determination that whatever the result, we would then bring this country back together again. So we would get behind whatever the result was, and we would then get on with the real job ahead and tackle the big issues that this country at the moment is sticking on the back burner because of the hopeless, inadequate state of both the main parties.
So you wouldn't put no deal on the ballot paper?
No.
Okay.
Remain fine. Or Mrs May's deal.
Okay. When you look back on this year, and it's been such an eventful year for all of us, and particularly for you, you left the Conservative Party in February, you set up the independent group, then it became Change UK, you had the European elections, it didn't go quite to plan, and then some of your colleagues left. How do you kind of reflect back on this year? How do you feel about how it's all gone?
Very sad. And it's all very unnecessary. Look, we couldn't change the fact that the European elections were going to be held so soon after the local elections, when the Lib Dems were bound to get a bounce because they'd done so badly in the previous set of elections, which were held in 2015 in those seats. They couldn't have gone any worse. And that couldn't have been predicted. And we couldn't not stand in the EU elections. And because of the way it all happened so quickly, we never had any time to form any form of Remain alliance or pact. And anyone, in any way, one wasn't offered. I'm going to be very clear about that. But even if it had been offered, it wasn't possible to deliver it. And so we did do the right thing. The problem with the EU elections was, unfortunately, our then leadership wasn't leading in the way that it should have done. We didn't run the campaign as a consequence that we should have run.
What do you think the mistakes were of that campaign?
Well, I don't think it was very helpful when the leader of the campaign effectively told people to go and vote for another political party. It wasn't one of our greatest moments. And we should have been very clear from the outset that in a democracy, you are entitled to stand, So we made a lot of mistakes. And, the leadership, I'm afraid to say, made a lot of mistakes. And we are where we are. And it is very sad because it didn't need to be like this, but we are where we are. And I'm I'm actually genuinely sad that people that I'd stood shoulder to shoulder with in taking those courageous decisions to leave our political parties have taken a different route. Very sad about that. But hey, who knows what might happen?
Yeah, it was, I remember when you came out, the day you came out and said, I'm leaving the Conservative Party, a lot of us as journalists wondered whether this might have been the start of a new and interesting party. There did seem to be a space in the centre ground. Why do you think, you've sort of talked about this already, but why do you think it didn't take off? And do you worry that it won't happen?
I think it's absolutely possible that it can. But I think people have to understand that at the moment, that centre ground space isn't as simple as some people, do forgive me, think. I'm not saying you do. I think a lot of the media perhaps do, and they don't understand the different traditions. So if you look at the sensible Labour moderates, they are much more social democrats. I'm more of a social democratic type than I am of an old liberal Dem type. And you've got this streak of liberalism, which is admirable, and there are many things that it believes in which I agree with. But equally, there are things that I don't agree with. And with the Liberal Democrats, they, in some ways, are hampered, in my humble opinion, by that very strong liberal streak which runs through them. But they also have a problem with their identity and, to use that modern expression, their branding. And there are many people from the social democratic Labour tradition who find it difficult to forgive them, if you like, for them going into coalition with the Conservatives. But more importantly, there's a matter of trust. And the mistake that the Liberals made was when you go out and you say, we will never support tuition fees being increased. In fact, we will vote for them to be abolished. And then you do such a monumental volte-face, that means that you then have problems of credibility. And remember, for anybody that says, well, hang on a moment, you voted for tuition. Yes, I did. But I never said I wasn't going to.
No.
So when I went very happily into coalition with the Lib Dems, with whom I have so much in common, and so much respect for, and enjoyed working with so many of them in government, the votes that I cast were true to what I had said. I didn't do anything different to what I had said, and it was true to my values and principles as I was then in the Conservative Party. So I think the Liberals have a number of difficulties, and of course they are in many ways a repository of protest. And I think we've seen that, and we have to be honest about the fact that in the last 3 years, if the Lib Dems were the answer to the Brexit question, then they would have done considerably better before the local elections than they have done. And I'm afraid they have failed to be that voice of the 48% and that voice of Remain. Now, whether that will change...
Because they did do very well in the European elections, to be fair to the
Yes,
Lib Dems.
of course they did, and so they blooming well should have done.
And people think they may be experiencing a resurgence. Maybe this is their moment.
Look, I'm not decrying that for one moment, and Liberal Democrats tend to work very hard and they campaign hard. But until that moment, and I think we were a huge part of that, we were a real catalyst in what has happened, that the strains and stresses that are going on in the Labour Party, where people are now speaking out with far more courage against anti-Semitism, the shift in the policy of the Labour Party, which is now more towards, not where it should be, but Remain and that second referendum, the work that I think that we have achieved in the Conservative Party, with those One Nation Tories having more courage and now being more unsettled about the prospect of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, and I think in the regeneration of that centre ground, and there is absolutely enough space in it for people of that more social democratic tradition, and the Lib Dems stand a real chance of making progress if they change in the way that they need to change, and in that event, who knows what may happen. We do have to have an honesty, and we do have to say that in that centre ground space, it doesn't belong to any one party or any one movement. But on the Brexit issue, of course, we are all absolutely united. But if Brexit happens, then what happens to the centre ground?
But as you know so well yourself, it's so difficult in British politics, at least in Westminster politics, to break through, to win a seat in the first past the post system. Do you not worry that you'll get squeezed out by A, the Lib Dems, B, Labour shifting towards a more Remain position? I mean, there's less room for you than there was in February.
Labour's not going anywhere under Jeremy Corbyn, let's be quite clear about that.
They have changed their position quite a lot the past couple of weeks.
But not enough.
Well, you might say that, but they are moving, aren't they?
They are moving, but why are they moving? Because of what happened during the European Union elections, the fact that 8 members of their party walked away from them, not just because of Brexit, but also because of the anti-Semitism. And I think that Labour absolutely reacted to that in absolute fear and terror of more that would leave by beginning to shift their vote. And they know, I mean, whatever Tom Watson says he's never going to leave the Labour Party. They can't even get Eddie Izzard elected onto the NEC. The idea that they are going to get rid of the hard left, who are now at every stage and every level, completely all the way through all the structures of the Labour Party, is for the birds. And the only way through it is for people who know in their hearts and in their minds that they fundamentally share the same values and principles of One Nation Tories like me, with whom we have far more in common than that which divides us. It is ridiculous that we aren't all in the same political party. If I can work with Chris Leslie, these people have to show real courage, like Chris has done, because Chris and I have so much more in common.
Have you still got MPs knocking on the door and saying, we might come over?
Oh, we have all sorts of conversations.
Has that sort of tailed off a bit, though? Because there was this feverish moment in February and March where we thought, there might be dozens of them that joined.
No, there was a lot of silly talk, frankly. And again, a lot of, unfortunately, people talking and saying, oh, this person and that person, which was not true. And even if it was true, you don't go out and talk about these things. You need proper, grown-up, responsible leadership. That is what this country is crying out for. And it has not had that leadership from the main parties for far too long. People are crying out for it.
Do you think you picked the wrong interim leader then?
Oh, we made some terrible mistakes over leadership, and I can tell you now the problem was that Chuka wouldn't step up to it. And if Chuka had stepped up to it, he would have been our leader. It was certainly what I always assumed it was absolutely was going to happen.
Why do you think he didn't?
You'd have to ask him that. But it isn't. He does have history of not stepping up. It's very sad because to me, he was absolutely the future for our country. I genuinely believe that. I wouldn't have left my party if I hadn't believed that.
Were you trying to persuade him to stand as leader? Were you having conversations saying, why aren't you standing?
God, yes. Goodness me, yes.
And
he should have been our leader, and he wasn't. And then after the EU elections, which were a terrific blow, of course they were. You don't give up at the first hurdle, for God's sakes.
How did you feel when he then joined the Lib Dems?
I think he made a terrible mistake. I was genuinely really sad about that. It was for me, it personally hurt. Really did hurt. I thought he was my big buddy.
Are you still
speaking? He was a major part of why I left the Tory party. To start something new with him as the leader. I don't want to be the bloody leader. I wanted Chuka to... I genuinely believe that Chuka Umunna should be Prime Minister of our country and had just what we were needing to be a great Prime Minister. I genuinely believe that.
Have you spoken to him since he joined the Lib Dems?
I have. Unfortunately, he has never called me. He has never called me.
So...
Which I think is very sad.
The friendship's sort of broken down then?
Yeah, very sad. Very sad. I mean, we have exchanged emails, but, it's sort of... Well, I won't go into it all, but you don't send people an email when you share an office with them, or you're just down the corridor. You pick up the phone, or you go into somebody's office and say, "Mate, we need to have a chat."
How did you find out that he was... Is that how you found out he was leaving for the Lib Dems, an email?
Oh no, I found out same time you found out. In fact, you probably found out before I did, because you probably were privy to some embargoed press notice. I found out as soon as it was on the news.
Right.
Nothing.
No pre-warning.
The last time I spoke to him was the Wednesday before the EU elections.
And so then you suddenly find out a couple of weeks later he's gone.
Anyway, we move on.
All right, look,
you're
Prime Minister now, Anna, so you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. And you've got to appoint a cabinet, which you mentioned earlier.
Quite right.
Who would you can have anyone in your cabinet. I'm going to give you free reign through the whole of history. You can have celebrities, anyone you want.
Oh.
Who would you, or you can just have plain old politicians.
No, I'm going to have people that are alive now. Is that all right?
That's absolutely fine. You can have whoever you want. Who would you love to have in that cabinet?
Ken Clarke, without a doubt. I'd have Chris Leslie there. Who else would I have in my cabinet? Justin Greening, would definitely be.
Interesting, yeah.
She's got a huge piece of work to do on social mobility.
Yeah. We had her on the podcast, actually. She talked a lot about that.
Yeah, she should be... Sorry, was she on before me?
She was on our podcast earlier this year.
Not that I'm doing any of that stuff, no. She's a star, Justine Greening. She would definitely be there. Who else would I have? I'd have Norman Lamb for sure. But
Lib Dem.
Absolutely, but he would be absolutely tasked to deliver on social care. No debates about that.
Yeah, big campaign on social care.
I would love to have Jo Swinson in my cabinet, because I think she's she's a great person, is Jo Swinson. She's very good, she's very able. She's horribly young, but she's brilliant. So I definitely have Jo there.
Probably the next leader of the Lib Dems. So you obviously have a good relationship with her.
Oh, good Lord, yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Who else? Okay, well, I'm coming back. I've gone back to the same old question now.
Who else would I not have? But the most brilliant Dominic Grieve.
Okay, all right.
End of conversation.
Big pal of yours. But hang on a minute. Coming back to Jo Swinson, if you get on really well with Jo, I know I'm coming back to the same old topic, but isn't it tempting to merge with the Lib Dems if you've got a lot in common with Jo and she sets up the party in a way that you like it? And doesn't it make sense to kind of join forces?
Look, let's be very honest about some of the things that I don't agree with the Lib Dems about, which is what we saw when we were in coalition government.
Okay.
Their approach, some of them, to issues of homeland security is very different to my approach, which is why you only saw one person serve in the Home Office. So this liberal tradition is that your rights are greater often than the
national security, say, for example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are times when you have to put your rights second to the greater good. There is also the matter of defence. There was only one Liberal who served in the Ministry of Defence. I believe in the at-sea nuclear deterrent. And I do believe that if the circumstances are right, we should go to war.
Okay.
Not attractive, God, we never want to do it, but I don't have any problem. I would have bombed in Syria in order to stop Assad from the slaughter of innocents. So I was very keen to be very clear about that, and that does put me in a different position to a lot of Liberals. That doesn't mean to say on the other great issues that we don't work absolutely hand in glove, but it comes back to this different tradition of the Social Democrat and the Liberal Democrat.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean to say you don't work together on these big issues, not just Brexit. Social care policy is an absolute obvious one. The environment, I'm sure, would be another one, and there are many other great issues as well, which is what we did in coalition government, for goodness sakes.
So you've got your cabinet of kind of national unity, it feels like to me, and now you've got to deal with some of the big issues facing the country as Prime Minister, not least Brexit.
I haven't filled my cabinet yet, because I would have...
Oh, who else do you want? Go on, you can have a few more if you want.
Well, I've got to have Mike Gapes in there, the mighty Mike Gapes. I've got to have Joan Ryan in there. She would be my chief whip. Whew, awesome lady. And Stephen Hammond, Conservative.
Okay, yeah.
Might have them as, could you have a joint chief whip? Anyway, Stephen Hammond's seriously talented. He'd be a brilliant, very, very, very good whip. So there might be a bit of a battle there. And of course, I'd have Anne Coffey there, because I would always want her experience as a social worker. She's got some great ideas on education. She's very free thinking. She's out of the box. You'd have somebody like her in there. There are bound to be some more Tories that I would have in there as well.
Okay. So you've got your cabinet
I'd bring
in place.
Joe Johnson back actually to run the
Would
university.
you?
Yeah,
Okay.
because he was an exceptionally good university. He wasn't in the cabinet, by the way, but he was an extremely good
Universities Minister, yeah.
Absolutely. I would have David Gauke, because I think Gauke's proved himself as a man of courage and integrity. And I'd be interested to see if I could find a role for Rory Stewart. We don't agree on Brexit, of course, but as Difford Secretary of State, I think he's been outstanding. Quite
a reformer, quite a radical mind.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So I've got a good problem, because I would love to have the first woman Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Amber Rudd?
I'm afraid I'm not sure I'd bring Amber, even though she's been a dear friend, into my cabinet.
What's gone on there then? Why not?
Because I'm afraid that when it's been called for, I gravely fear that she's putting her own future before the country's future on no deal.
Because she did say recently that she could stomach keeping no deal on the table.
And it was because I think she's actually said she'd be happy to serve in Boris's cabinet.
She has, yeah.
And he has made it clear you can only serve in his cabinet if you accept a no deal, the strong, that he believes in this no deal Brexit. I'm afraid it's really saddened me, because she's got a lot of strengths, but you've got to put the country first in my cabinet.
Would you give...
Don't have this, nonsense about what suits your interests or your narrow party interests. This is a government of the big thinkers, a big tent government.
Would you give Boris Johnson a job under any circumstances?
Not. No.
What do you think he'd be like as Prime Minister, if we're assuming he will be Prime Minister? What do you think?
I think I'm being really serious. He was an appalling Foreign Secretary. He was the worst Foreign Secretary our country has had in living memory. This is serious stuff. And he's about to waltz in to number 10 and be the Prime Minister of our country as we face the biggest national crisis that we've had since the Second World War. And this man, this clown on a zip wire, is going to be our country's Prime Minister. I'm appalled. I mean, I've not watched all the hustings, but I've seen enough to see that he has not changed at all. He has learnt nothing since he was that terrible Foreign Secretary, and he's about to be Prime Minister.
Do you worry then for the future of the country?
Of course I do.
Even though he was in your party?
I think he's lazy. He pays no attention to detail, and being mendacious seems to come incredibly naturally to him. Mendacity runs through him.
What was he like to deal with when you were in the party with him? Because I know you didn't serve in the Foreign Office with him, but you obviously had some dealings with him.
No, not many dealings with him actually, because he only came into Parliament in the latter stages of my time in government actually, and my only dealings with Boris was when he was Foreign Secretary. And I knew that he'd been at a cabinet at the Chequers meeting where Greg Clark explained how the car industry, the automotive sector works. So it's 475,000 people that work in the automotive sector. And why this thing called just-in-time supply chains, why the free movement of goods and services is so critical and the lack of customs is so critical to manufacturers like the automotive sector, and why they were here, the great Japanese companies, the great German companies, why they have based so many of their manufacturing plants in this country, which is as a bridgehead into Europe. 80% of the cars produced by Toyota in Derby are exported, and they can only be exported to Europe, because if you want to export the rest of in the world, then they divvy up the world in those local markets.
Mm-hmm.
All these things were explained to Boris, and he had until that time known nothing and not understood that, and he was the Foreign Secretary arguing for, no deal, oh, it'll be fine, and I challenged him in the lobby about this and what he was going to do and what he was going to say, and all he can do when he's confronted with facts, evidence, facts, is go, it'll be fine, and that's what he does every time he gets questioned, whether it's by Andrew Neil, your good self, any other journalist, and it's tough, and the big tough questions are asked of him, he goes, it'll be fine. So could somebody please ask him, why did he vote for Theresa May's deal if it's such a crap deal?
Mm-hmm.
Why did he vote for it?
Because he changed his mind about it, didn't he, halfway through?
He changes his mind all the time. He changed his mind half an hour before he decided to leave.
And that famous Telegraph column,
campaign.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He changed his mind. And this man is going to be our Prime Minister. God help us.
Who do you think would be worse as Prime Minister, Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, very interesting. Because the trouble with Corbyn is that it's not just that he's a member of the hard left. The sort of policies that he will undoubtedly inflict upon our country will do the most appalling and immediate harm and damage to our economy. In contrast to Johnson, whereby the harm that Brexit will do, a hard Brexit will do, is reparable. We get rid of him, we get somebody I've just become Prime Minister.
Yeah, you're Prime Minister, yeah.
I can undo the harm that a Johnson character will do.
Rejoin the EU or...
Rejoin the EU, mitigate the damage that has been done. The restoration of the customs union, the single market, 2 examples of making things immediately better. But with Corbyn, the damage and harm that his hard left, old Trotskyite, socialist policies will do to our country will take a very, very long time to mitigate and to undo.
Okay. Well, look,
in the meantime, we will have lost the pound, will have plummeted investment. I mean, we have a problem with investment in any event.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be even greater under Corbyn.
As Prime Minister, let's talk about your Brexit policy. So, of course, you'd have a second referendum. We've
revoked Article 50, by the way.
Right, so you would revoke Article 50.
It's been revoked. Yeah. That was part of my manifesto.
Okay, fine. So revoke.
And now we're going back to the British people to get their stamp on that.
I see. So you'd revoke, and then you'd have a referendum to say, are you happy with staying in the EU / Theresa May's rough deal?
Now you've seen it, because it's the only deal in town. That's another great question to be put to to Hunt and to Boris Johnson as well, is how they think some magical deal exists with a commission that doesn't exist all before October the 31st. This is all for the birds.
And if we've already left the EU by the time you become Prime Minister, you'd run on a ticket to rejoin the EU? Yep. How do you think this autumn is actually going to play out?
But we know what, we'll never get as good a deal as we've got already.
Do you think when we rejoin...
There's no debate about that. We cannot get the same deal.
Okay.
We're not going to get the rebate.
Schengen and all that kind of stuff.
We're not going to get the rebate, and we'd probably have to be a member of the Euro, and we'd probably have to be a member of Schengen as well.
Okay.
We'll never get the great deal that we currently have.
How do you think the autumn's going to play out? Because everyone wants to know what is going to happen in September and October. Boris Johnson, we assume, will be Prime Minister. He said he's willing to leave without a deal. Parliament looks as though it is desperately searching for a mechanism to try and slam the brakes on no deal. But what do you think is going to happen?
I have no idea.
Is there a way of stopping no deal, do you think,
of course,
for MPs? You think there's still a mechanism left that hasn't been exhausted?
I honestly can't believe that Boris Johnson would be so foolish as to prorogue Parliament. Because there would be uproar. It
would be the nuclear option.
Well, there would be uproar. We would be going down to not Westminster Hall, down the building next door to the QE2. We'd be down there.
Oh, right, sitting as a parliament, yeah. Methodist
Rory
Hall.
Stewart claimed the idea, but the idea had already been had in a WhatsApp group that I'm a member of, cross-party group. Oh, yes, you bet. It should be really serious. And if those Conservatives who say they would do anything to stop it, if they actually show the courage that is required, and which many others have exhibited, then that would happen. And there would be a sufficient uproar that we would not allow Johnson to do it. Now, in that event, he's got to make a choice. Because he doesn't want to be the shortest termed Prime Minister in British history. So his only way out of the mess is not to go to a general election, because he won't win a general election unless the Conservative Party, they would stand no chance of winning a general election before any delivery of Brexit. No chance. Because if they go in for a deal with Farage, they'll absolutely split the Conservative Party and the vote, and they won't win. They know that, which is why Boris keeps saying there will not be a general election before the delivery of Brexit. Even he's worked that one out. So what's he going to do? He can't have a general election because he's not going to win it. So how's he going to resolve the great Brexit blockage?
Second referendum, I guess you'd
Go back to the British
say.
people.
Okay. Would you vote to bring down a Boris Johnson government if he went for no deal?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because there was this, there was a vote of no confidence earlier in the year, wasn't there? But at that stage, you guys, in Change UK, as it was called, weren't keen for an election at that point.
No, there wasn't a vote of confidence at that time. That was when I was on the Conservative benches.
Fair point. Fair point.
If-
You're absolutely right. It's hard to get the chronology
So
of
much
this year. Exactly.
So much happens in such a short period.
But there was lots of discussion, wasn't there, earlier this year when you guys set up Change UK about, would you be willing to take part in a vote of no
that was
confidence?
our then leader who was talking about it. Nobody else was.
Okay, fair enough. But you're quite clear now that if Boris Johnson goes for no deal,
is going to be,
you would walk through those lobbies with Labour and say, we are bringing down this government.
Absolutely. But you see, that isn't going to happen. Because Boris would lose that vote. He would lose the vote.
Because there'd be enough Conservatives, you think, who would
definitely.
bring down... Okay.
Oh, yes. So he's not... And remember, it doesn't bring down the government. Do forgive me. You lose a vote of no confidence, and then 14 days... There are 14 days...
Yeah, to form a government. Yeah.
I still believe, genuinely believe, it is not impossible that we wouldn't find ourselves in a position whereby we have a government of national unity. I would not be Prime Minister, but you can imagine some of these characters, some of these really able people being in such a government, couldn't you?
So you think there's a possibility of a government of national unity?
Nothing is impossible in this crisis. Nothing is impossible. You can't rule it out.
Would you join that government? Would you happily serve in that?
Oh, goodness me, yes, of course.
Yeah. Even if it was promising to deliver Brexit, because it might be a good...
No. If it's a government of national unity, it won't be promising to deliver Brexit. It would be, I think you'd see in those circumstances, it would be promising to go back to the British people.
It wouldn't be a government of unity then, though, would it? Because all the Brexiteers would feel alienated by that.
All the Brexiteers, let's get that one absolutely straight. The majority of people in that parliament do not want a no-deal Brexit.
True.
And whilst I agree with you, whipped as they were, the majority did not vote for a second referendum, even though it got more votes than any other option. But with the whip off and with the impasse absolutely still there, what is the alternative? People won't vote for Theresa's deal. There is no other magic deal. No deal is a complete disaster for this country and is not what people voted for in the referendum, most importantly, if I may say. Because they were promised a deal. They've got this thing called a deal, which isn't a deal. But anyway, they've got Mrs May's withdrawal agreement. So how do you get through the impasse? Nobody can answer this. Nobody puts this scenario to Hunt and to Johnson. And the only way through the impasse is to take it back to the British people. And I know that the British people are fed up to their back bloody teeth with the whole thing. I know that. And of course they are. And I know they're frustrated and they feel let down by politicians. But I'm afraid that in this unique set of circumstances, now we know what Brexit looks like, it is absolutely eminently sensible to break the impasse by putting it back to the British people for their final say on this matter. And be
Okay.
clear, if they were to vote for Theresa's withdrawal agreement, end of, that's it. We leave with that agreement.
Let me put a question to you then that people who advocate a people's vote struggle to answer sometimes, which is, what if you have a second referendum and say it's 52% Remain? How do you heal the country then? Because those 48% of Brexiteers are not going to go away quietly. They are going to be furious.
I don't agree with you necessarily on that. I don't accept 48% would be angry.
Well,
I'm
they
not
wouldn't-
saying... No, hang
well,
on.
maybe even the 30%, even if it was 30% who were angry and the other 18% were like
there are
vaguely apathetic, they're not going to go away
But there are
quietly.
angry people now out there in the real world, really upset and angry people who say, well, I'm part of that 48%, or the million plus young people 3 years on who didn't have a vote in 2016, who were the people who were absolutely going to bear the brunt of Brexit, who say, and I have not even had any say in this, and it's my future. And they genuinely believe that their future has been stolen and taken away from them. So you talk about angry people. They're not the mob, that small handful of mobsters who make death threats to me and sometimes come along here. These are real human beings getting on with the rest of their lives. And I can tell you now, they will never forgive members of Parliament that forced through a Brexit that this country did not vote for and was not promised. And it is right that we can go back and have that final say. And this, do forgive me, but this media narrative about, oh, there's all these angry people. Yes, of course there are. There's a section of people, and I know who these people are. They're my own constituents in many cases, who will say to me, Anna, you said, if we vote leave, we'll leave the European Union. And we've voted, we've had our vote, and we've voted to leave, well, now we should leave. And I say to them, I know, and I hear that. And if we had left in the way that I voted for and wanted when we triggered Article 50, we would have left the European Union. But that was denied by Theresa May and her vision of Brexit and her uncompromising stance. Now that that boat has set sail and has gone, we are left with this withdrawal agreement. And it's either that or we stay, and we have to take that back in all the unique circumstances back to the British people.
Okay, well, we can't...
And then we heal this country, and we begin by looking at the causes of Brexit, what led people, a large number of people, to vote in the way that they did 3 years ago.
We can't keep you much longer, Anna, so I'm going to have to speed through some more questions
Go on,
before
sorry.
we finish off. No. Brexit always gets the conversation going. Which Prime Minister from history do you think you would...
asking me questions?
I know.
Go on.
Which Prime Minister from history do you think you would emulate?
Oh God, you have to Churchill. I mean, good Lord, wouldn't get anywhere near it. But my goodness me, in terms of leadership and in terms of being pragmatic and healing rifts and bringing people together, oh yes.
What do you think we've got to learn from Theresa May?
I think there's a lot to learn from Theresa about how you don't go about things. And Theresa's biggest mistake was that she never reached out to the 48%. In fact, she derided the 48%. She was uncompromising. She might sit and listen, but it was a pretend listen. It wasn't a real listen. She didn't take it away and act on it. And also having your feet on the ground and being pretty normal, having friends, you know, just being leading as normal a life as you can in this game that we're both in, actually.
We are.
It's really important. Most of my friends, overwhelming majority of my friends, have got nothing to do with politics. They are perfectly normal people. and that's really important, actually.
And actually, a lot of people
important.
say, you know, MPs are out of touch, etc., etc. I'll leave that debate for another time. But you all go back to your constituencies, and you probably mix with more people than the average person does. I think it's actually quite unfair to say that MPs...
I think you're right, but especially those of us in marginal seats. Look, there are some people who go back and they mix with their local party.
True.
I have never done that. And with respect, you know, one of the things I've learned from these wonderful new people that I'm working with in the Independent Group for Change is how the Labour Party acts. And Labour MPs talk about, I've been back to my constituency and I've talked to, actually, the Labour Party. I don't. talk to people in political parties. I talk to real people. But that is my own life. It's my family. It's my friends. They're all normal.
Let's round off with just some fun
Go on,
questions.
quick, go on.
Fun ones. You've been a presenter for ITV. I have to declare that interest.
Central.
Yeah. A barrister.
Mighty Central.
You've been a barrister. You've been an MP. You've been a minister. What was your favourite job?
Being criminal barrister.
Was it?
16 years. Best job. Apart from when I was a minister in the MOD.
Okay.
When I was defence minister, I genuinely enjoyed it. And one of the reasons I enjoyed it, because we did something which was really, really important. And that was we were making sure we changed the law, we changed the rules, a long-standing injustice so that women who had been widowed could remarry and not lose their pensions, a long-standing campaign. The thing I didn't do, I did do some great work in health, in plain packaging of cigarettes, and I think I was quite courageous in that. The thing that I didn't deliver on, though I tried, was justice for people who had loved ones or were indeed people themselves infected with bad blood. And that's
the contaminated blood scandal.
And I wish I'd got a photocopy of the handwritten letter I wrote David Cameron saying, this is the last great injustice, give them the money.
Yeah.
Never mind inquiries, I mean that's important, but give them the bloody money, for goodness sakes, give them the money. I'm sorry, I'm swearing quite a lot in this podcast. I'm assuming it's different kind of broadcast.
Yeah, you're absolutely fine. We'll let you off. There's no watershed in these podcasts.
But I was a criminal barrister and I defended.
What did you love about being a criminal barrister?
Because it was intellectually challenging, but you were a social worker with a wig on. And I very rarely did I not have an element of real time for my clients. There were some clients who was very difficult to be civilised to be truthful. You know, when you look at somebody you think, I think you are a paedophile actually, really hard, but you have to go on, be professional and do the job. But, you know, I still meet clients, I bump into them in the street and I'll say, do you remember me? And they go, oh, how are you doing? They'll say, one actually said to me, thank you for that 5 years ago. I mean, it's not quite what you want to hear. But for a lot of them, they'll say, thank you, because you told me I was at a crossroads and you helped me to make the right, go down the right road. And, you know, I've not been in trouble for, you know, 15 years, whatever it now may be. And I've got to, there's one guy I met, I was out canvassing in a certain part of my constituency and he shouted at me. And he said, Anna, and I went out, I think he shouted Miss Soubry or whatever. But I went over and he said, do you remember me? And he's now a painter and decorator with his own little business, doing really well.
Okay,
2 children, lives in a part of my constituency, completely turned his life around. How brilliant is that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
What would your, just last couple of questions, what would your vice be as Prime Minister, do you think? What would your vice be? I mean,
my vice?
Yeah, would it alcohol, would it be?
No, my vice is...
You're not a smoker?
No, I don't smoke. My vice would probably be spending too much time in the garden and cooking. What would your
virtue be as Prime Minister?
And my girls. Oh, it would be the fact that I am... I'm going to do what is absolutely right for this country, and I will be brave and I will be true to my principles, but I will always listen to people and I'll admit when I'm wrong.
Okay.
And if I'm wrong, I'll change. I'll change course.
You'll change UK.
I'll change UK.
All right, Anna, on that note, we'll end it there. Thanks so much for being on Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you.